I've decided that we're going to add a note. So where did we have the word, oh, inconsistent. Okay, let's put a triangle over consistent. And let's go ahead and add explicitly a note to say that consistency is a standard used by philosophers to evaluate each other's theories. All right, so let's continue on with this paragraph and move on to the next page. So the dispute, dispute, problem, using those interchangeably, or there's a dispute about a problem, right, is merely verbal and is due to nothing but a confusion, okay? So the problem which is disputed is what? He's saying the nature is verbal, right? And it's due to, there's a cause, a confusion about the meanings of words. Okay, so notice these neat triangles that we haven't highlighted during this unit. We've got something about a problem. Let's go ahead and put a triangle over that. And dispute, verbal, confusion, meanings of words. So this gives you a sense of the direction that Stace is going to go in trying to do what he thinks is construct a resolution to this confusion, this problem, this debate. He says, it is what is now fashionably called a semantic problem. Okay. So I would like for you to go ahead and include a definition for the word semantic. Okay. So whatever instructions I gave you initially for the first definition that I want you to do so for the word semantic. Again, find a definition that is relevant to the paragraph that we just finished, but you might also want to wait to look for your definition till we read through this paragraph, because that might help you as well. You could even wait till we read through this paragraph, because remember, your definition that you find needs to be one that really works well and really helps you to understand and keeps in mind the context in which the word is being used. And this will help you in your research for a good definition. Make sure you're using an online dictionary for all these definitions that I'm asking for. And please, please don't forget, you got to give me a direct URL in the comment section. Write down the website address like, dictionary.com here. And then don't forget that your dictionary definition has to be handwritten and whatnot. Okay. Oh, and don't forget that no version of the word semantic can occur in the definition itself. All right, expanding your vocabulary, guys. Expanding it a lot in this lesson. All right, so let's go on to the next paragraph, line 26. How does a verbal dispute arise? Let us consider a case which, although it is absurd in the sense that no one would ever make the mistake which is involved in it, yet it illustrates the principle we shall have to use in the solution of a problem. So let's go ahead and underline verbal dispute. Okay, and notice that he says consider a case. So he's going to do kind of like, he's going to set up a hypothetical situation, what I have referred to before as a thought experiment. In fact, we're going to call it a conceptual thought experiment. I'm still here. Give me a second. I'm messing with some settings. Okay. So, of course, this is his main question at issue for this paragraph. Main question at issue. QAI stands for main question at issue. How does a verbal dispute arise? Well, to help you understand how a verbal dispute arises, he sets up a hypothetical situation or scenario. It's a conceptual thought experiment, if you will. Okay, so let's see what we mean by that. And notice that he says what he's going to set up for a conceptual thought experiment is not one that anyone would really take seriously, but he thinks it's going to do what? It's going to illustrate something. Illustrate what? He's going to try to illustrate an answer to the question, how does a verbal dispute arise? So he goes on to say, suppose that someone believed that the word man means a certain sort of five-legged animal. So in other words, his thought experiment is involving that of what? A concept. So I said this is a conceptual thought experiment. And he's saying, let's take the word man. And I know this is crazy and no one would really make this mistake, but imagine that we said a man is a five-legged creature. Let's say that that's how we define the word man. Now, if we were to go looking for a man as in a human biological entity that has no abnormalities with DNA, are we going to find any references? Any reference? Are we going to find any examples of five-legged creatures that we would call man in the sense that we tend to use it? And of course we would say no. But let's see what he goes on to say that, right? So he says, suppose someone believed that the word man means a certain sort of five-legged animal. Okay, so the word man, that's the concept. And then he's saying, so that's the word, right? Or the sign. I have word and sign written in there. And then this is the, notice that he uses the word what means. And then the definition begins here, definition. Okay. A certain sort of five-legged animal. In short, that five-legged animal is the correct definition of man. Okay, so not only does someone think or believe truly the word man is defined as or should be defined as or means five-legged creature, but they think that this is the correct definition. So notice how he's bringing in the idea of not just a definition, but what? A correct definition. He might then look around the world and rightly observing that there are no five-legged animals in it, he might proceed to deny the existence of man. So yeah, if you define the word man as a five-legged creature, right, then when you go and look for a five-legged creature out in reality, right, so this is reality beyond the definition, beyond the word, in actual life, we're not going to find any. So then what might happen? He says, well, you might proceed to deny the existence of man. So if you can't find any, then you might say, oh, well, there are none. He says this preposterous conclusion would have been reached because he was using a what? Incorrect definition of man. All you would have to do is show him his mistake. All you would have to do to show him his mistake would be to give him what? The correct definition, or at least to show him that his definition was wrong. And of course here, we're not using wrong in the moral sense, we're using it in the terms of accuracy, aligns with what is a definition that aligns with the reality that we're talking about. Okay, so we're not using this in the moral sense. So I want you to write out here a point of iteration, put wrong is not being used in the moral sense here. Okay, just write that right here. The word wrong is not being used in the moral sense here. Okay, so so he's saying, look, all you would have to do is no one's going to say there aren't any reference or examples for how we use the word man. The problem isn't that there isn't any men. The problem is the definition is wrong. So just like we wouldn't deny that there are men, right? We're not gonna deny that there's free will. That's what he's going to tell us. So the problem is here. Okay. So problem, verbal dispute is with the definition. Verbal dispute is with the definition. All right, so now let's go on to the next paragraph. So both the problem and its solution, of course, both the problem and its solution would, of course, be entirely verbal. So what do you think we're going to put a triangle over on line 40? So over problem, and then over what word next? Solution, put a triangle over that. And notice that he says what? Entirely verbal. Let's go ahead and do a double arrow triangle for the idea that the problem and the solution for what the definition of man would be what? Entirely verbal. Now look at what he says. The problem of free will, so go ahead and put a triangle over problem and then a triangle with double arrows over the word free will, and its solution, I shall maintain, is verbal in exactly the same way. So put a triangle over, I think we're right here, verbal, and if I haven't told you to, over the word problem and free will. Okay, so again, he's not trying to argue that, you know, people really do define man as a five-legged creature, right? And his main point isn't to gain clarity on men. What did he say this was going to illustrate? The principle which we shall have to use in the solution of the problem. What problem? The problem of free will. And he's saying what he's illustrated with the case of how you can define, how someone might, in theory, define man as a five-legged creature and then deny that there are men. He's saying the problem of free will is exactly the same. So he says the problem has been created by the fact that learned men, you know, those philosophers and psychologists he referenced in the second paragraph of this excerpt, especially the philosophers, have assumed an incorrect definition of free will, and then finding that there is nothing in the world which answers to the definition, have denied its existence. So of course we want to put a triangle over problem. We want to, and notice what he says, created. In other words, there wasn't a problem with free will. It's always existed, in other words, but these philosophers, these theory people created the problem where there wasn't one. It's basically what he's saying, okay? So he says, and it has to do with what? An assumption, okay, that these philosophers had. And what was the assumption? The assumption was itself their definition of free will, their starting point, their definition for free will, leading them to deny it. So, of course, we want to put a triangle with double arrows over incorrect definition, and, of course, a triangle with double arrows over free will. All right, so, again, definition, right, and denied its existence. And, of course, it refers back to free will. So he's calling our attention to what? The problem of free will and its true nature. Okay, so I would like for you to write here, just thought I'd draw that little diagram right there, right? So what's the definition, and then are there reference? He thinks they're reference, but the issue here is with the definition, right? Just like it was for how this strange case of defining man. But what he's saying so far, the main point is that the problem of, I'm just going to use FW from now on to mention free will, and morality is purely conceptual. Okay, we could say verbal, semantic, but we're going to say conceptual at this point. And what is he going to say? Philosophers and certain psychologists are using an incorrect definition, that's short for definition, of, now I'm going to put the word in quotation marks because I'm not using it, I'm mentioning it, free will. Here I'm using the word free will. Here I'm mentioning the word free will. The word free will is the topic of my claim. All right. That is, yeah, how it's defined. Now, let's go on. As far as logic, let's be logical here, is concerned, their conclusion is just as absurd as that of the man who denies the existence of man. So you can see he's going back to the illustrative case right here, right? The only difference is that the mistake in the latter, that is the case of free will, in the latter, he's talking about the existence of man and how we define free will. So that's what he means by that. Okay, the existence of man, and so by that he's going back to his conceptual thought experiment up here. Okay. In the problem of the latter, that is, with defining man as a five-legged creature, the case is what? Obvious and crude, while the mistake which the deniers of free will made is rather what? Subtle and difficult to detect. So the problem with the conceptual verbal semantic problem with free will is exactly the same conceptual verbal semantic problem with how man was defined in this conceptual thought experiment. It's just that it's easier. The mistake here with the concept and how we're using it and its implications is easier to see in this case, this illustrative case, than it is with the concept and reality of free will itself. It's harder for us to see the mistake that's being made, the verbal, semantic, conceptual-based issue.